Being a vet is probably one of the biggest advantages I had during my paramedic to RN process. If you listen to this episode, I'm going to share with you several things that can help your transition easier. Welcome to my podcast. I'm a 10-year U.S. Army paratrooper and combat veteran. I had dreams of going to PA school, but of course, I had no education. I never really saw myself going to college. My educational benefits was expired. I had the Montgomery GI Bill, and that kind of had like a 10-year limit. So after that 10 years was up, I lost it. So by the time I figured out that I wanted to be a PA, I had no educational benefits. But while going through paramedic school, I paid that out of my pocket. But it was during that time I was awarded VA disability. See, about 8 months prior, I had a friend of mine who really was on my case about filing for VA disability. So, reluctantly I did. And I was awarded. And my award came about, like I said, my second month doing paramedic school. The dilemma at the time was, how can I continue an educational track and work at the same time? Because as a paramedic, I really wasn't making a lot of money. I paid out of pocket for my associate's degree in EMS, and I was looking to complete a paramedic bachelor's at Western Carolina. But after that, I was thinking, if I'm only making 16 to $18 an hour, how can I take 2 years off to go to school? And another thing was, if I don't get into PA school, I did not want to be stuck with a paramedic bachelor's degree. So it was around that time I was thinking about changing course and to come into the nursing. And I remember a friend of mine talking about voc rehab from a long time ago. And when I looked up, I realized that it wouldn't help me for a paramedic bachelor's, but it definitely would help me for nursing. I applied probably maybe about a month before I applied for nursing school. And of course, I was accepted into both. Voc Rehab paid for my tuition for my associates and for my BSN, my bachelor's. Oh, yeah, I got a stipend too. And that's kind of my story with Voc Rehab. So I want to kind of get into to it to kind of give you a little bit more information on how this program can help you. Even if you decide not to do nursing, this program can be valuable to whatever you decide to do, especially education wise. So some people call it voc rehab, some call it vocational rehab. If you look it up, it can be called VRE or even Chapter 31. So basically, whatever you want, any of those terminologies kind of refer to the same thing. But most importantly, to understand is that it's an employment program, not an educational program. I'm going to repeat that. It's an employment program, not an educational program. I think most people that get denied, they go in with the opposite thinking that it's an educational program, and when it don't work out for them, they kind of sit around and say, "Hey, well, what happened?" So, what the program does, it takes in consideration your current education and your disabilities. So, let's say, for example, but actually, I get into that a little bit. But you're assigned a counselor who will approve or disapprove you based on your situation. Also, if you're working in a field that aggravates your disabilities, then you may be rehab for education. So let me give you this example. As a medic, I was doing heavy lifting all day. My disabilities during that time were one of my elbows and both my knees. So if I wanted to do a paramedic bachelor's, then that would help me. Would that help me find employment? In a medic in a place that wouldn't aggravate my disabilities? Probably not. But as a medic, I do lifting all day. So check, that would probably uh, give me an opportunity to use the program because it aggravates my disabilities. Two, would my associate help me find sustainable employment? Probably not. So when I get back to the idea of getting a paramedic bachelor's degree, you can kind of start to see how that would maybe give me a little bit of difficulty being approved for the program because I'm going to be still in the same field and there's no different variety of job that I could get. But rehab to be a nurse would, because many areas of nursing I could find nursing jobs that wouldn't aggravate my disability. And that's kind of how I sold my case. I remember talking to the counselor. I remember giving them some listings of some remote from home nursing jobs that I could do from home without violating my disabilities. And they kind of thought the same way I thought. As being a paramedic, I could make my disabilities worse. But if I could cross over to nursing and kind of get me a quote unquote cushy nursing job, then they would approve that and they would rehab me. So that's how I was approved. Now, another example, if you really think about it, if you have a bachelor's or master's and deemed to be employable in another area, let's say for example, if you have a IT bachelor's or if you have maybe an engineering bachelor's or master's, I'm not saying that you can't, but I'm just saying it would be a real hard fight for educational rehabilitation. Keep in mind, like I said earlier, Voc Rehab is an employment program. It's not an educational program. But to qualify, you have to be at least 30%. And I think for me, I was 40% at the time. And this is the most important part. If you're going to be rehab with education, it's going to be to the entry level of the field that you're approved for. Key word is entry level. So, what does that mean? Let's kind of get into that just a little deeper. Let's take example if it's the PA. If you approve to be a PA, then of course your entry level would be a master's. If you're approved for something like respiratory therapy, then of course your entry level would be an associate's. If your entry level is to be an attorney or a lawyer, then it's to have a Juris Doctorate. And yes, the matter of fact, yes to the answer to the question you're going to ask me. That means that yes, you would have to get your bachelor's, which would be covered, and your Juris Doctorate, which is your JD. Even if it's to become a medical doctor, then yes, it would be bachelor's and medical school. Obviously, it would be hard to get approved for something like to be an MD, and obviously, it would be easier if you already had a bachelor's. But people are. I've met people who've been approved and have finished medical school due to voc rehab, so it is possible. My rehab plan was to get my bachelor's. I was able to show proof that in my area that most jobs preferred a bachelor's degree nurse. And if you didn't have it, you would have to sign a contract to have it by a certain amount of time if you wanted to stay employed. Because obviously, uh, to become an RN, entry level can be an associate's degree. So I was able to graduate with a BSN from East Carolina. That's after earning an associate degree in nursing from a community college paramedic to RN program. And Voc Rehab paid for them both. But I know one of the most important things, and I think this is one of the confusions that you may run into because of the different variety of programs that's available if you've been listening to my podcast. If you have a bachelor's and you get approved for a master's direct entry program, then you may have to educate your counselor that it's a pre-licensure, which means entry level. You're just coming in at a high degree. Let me explain this. Some people think that the degree in nursing is your license, but it's not. The degree is your degree. You could be an associate degree. You can have an associate's degree and be an RN. You can have a bachelor's degree and be an RN. You can have a master's degree and be an RN. RN is your license. It's just that's the amount of education it's going to take for you to achieve your license. The lowest is an associate's degree, but it has no bearing on entry level because entry level is just being able to meet the minimum standards to sit for the NCLEX. So if you come in at the master's level, but you have no RN license, this is considered entry level. So you may have to educate your counselor on that. There are other programs to consider too, and this is kind of going outside the voc rehab. If you're looking to get into nursing as a veteran, there's another program that you may want to consider besides maybe an accelerated BSN, paramedic to RN bridge, and all these other programs I've talked about. There's a special program called Veterans BSN, VBSN, if you Google it and look it up. But it's just another process for entry level if you already have your prerequisites already for nursing. I just did a search in my area and I found out that UNC Chapel Hill has a VBSN program. North Carolina Central has a VBSN program. These are special pathways that are great because it puts you in a different category. Usually, if you fit the criteria, then you're good. But it kind of sets you aside a little bit from everyone else without having to compete with the masses. So, as a vet, hopefully, I gave you maybe a little bit a different alternative financing financing opportunity for you to finance your education without having to take out student loans. Like I said, the voc rehab program for me has been great. It paid for everything, even gave me a computer, it paid for my uniforms, it paid for all the way down to books, papers, pens, and I got a stipend for going to school. As always, hey, make sure you guys follow me on Instagram at Paramedic2RNinfo. Remember the number 2.